Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. The Covid Enquiry is rumbling along quite nicely, and yesterday it saw the first of the Shipman sisters give evidence. The second Shipman sister will be giving evidence later today, and I will be covering that in a separate video. But Jeane Freeman stood before the panel giving evidence to the worst of her ability. Some people would say she lied. Certainly some of the things she was saying was at complete variance with the reality or the expectations or the experience of people fighting on the front line. In other cases, of course, it was simply an exercise in blame shifting. It wasn't me, she was saying. It was the big boy did it and ran away. More often than not, of course, she was blaming Westminster, although at that point 14 years of SNP rule had nothing to do with it, and any decision to put people with COVID into care homes, of course, that wasn't her either. Well, we'll take a look at this. We'll see what's going on. We'll see why some of the answers to her questions angers people, annoys people, and infuriates people, and to see what she actually said, and to see why what she's saying seems so laughably wrong in many cases. Anyway, here goes. COVID bereaved aghast at Jeane Freeman comments as Nicola Sturgeon handed a WhatsApp warning. They were told, all of them, Sturgeon as well, were told, do not delete any messages off WhatsApp, because they were using WhatsApp rather than official channels, because some of the things they were saying they did not want recorded, they did not want that kept for posterity, and they wanted that to be completely outside the scope of any inquiry. But now this inquiry is saying, oh no, it's in the scope, and they've got the receipts one side, so they know that these WhatsApp messages were sent, and if they're deleted, and they were given a do not delete notice by the court, and if any were deleted, then that is a very serious crime. That's tampering with evidence. That's perversion of the course of justice. That is that's jail. So they will be very, very worried about this WhatsApp issue and about what's going to come out. So especially when you think about the decisions made to put COVID people into care homes. Well, I'll come to that later in the video. Anyway, the former health minister tried to shift the blame to the UK government. Well, what else? What else do these people know? Oh, it's the UK government's fault, because it's always the UK government's fault, even though you've had 14 years of devolved healthcare, and it is entirely down to you and your decisions. She claimed Scotland never ran out of PPE, something contested by families who lost loved ones, something contested by the care workers, something contested by the doctors and nurses, something contested by everyone who was dealing with this. She's just outright lying. So Scotland's COVID bereaved families have been left angry and aghast at evidence given to the UK inquiry by former Health Secretary and possible mass murderer Jeane Freeman. We reported how the ex-SNP minister admitted Scotland could have been better prepared for the COVID pandemic. She tried to shift blame onto the UK government and Brexit and claimed there was not a plan that would have been able to cope with the virus. You weren't able to cope with the virus, that's for sure. She also told the hearing Scotland never ran out of personal protective equipment. Quite clearly a lie. Something contested by families upset at how the government operated during COVID. It didn't. It ran around blithely, inventing things, making it up as it went along. Oh, we've got to stay this far apart, that far apart. Oh, only let's meet 3 people at a time. Let's close that down. No, we've got to close that down. They hadn't got a clue. They didn't know what they were doing. They were panicking like hell. Miss Freeman and the former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon have been dubbed the Shipman sisters by some families and every outside everyone over their policy of sending untested hospital patients to care homes. Miss Sturgeon is due to give evidence to the inquiry today, Thursday. Lawyer Amar Anwar is representing some of the families who lost loved ones during the pandemic. He told Good Morning Scotland on Thursday, many of my clients who were sending messages to as Miss Freeman was speaking were left aghast, were left angry, were left astounded, because they couldn't believe their very ears over what these people were saying. Freeman was up there and quite clearly lying to the panel, lying to the inquiry, lying to everyone who's listening. She was quite clearly lying. because she knows that the truth would put her in prison. He went on, this is Amar Anwar. From the evidence that is widely available, that people can go onto the website of the Covid Enquiry, they will find there was a shortage of PPE, according to the British Medical Association, according to nearly half of all nurses in Scotland who were surveyed, and then hence why the Covid bereaved were left aghast by the evidence of Jeane Freeman, who appeared to run circles around herself and, like UK ministers before her, was unable to utter the words, "We failed." Our frontline workers were crying out for PPE, and a number of them lost their lives. They didn't know what they were doing. They were probably in shock over the state of everything. But that's fine at the time. It was a very shocking time. But to sit here 2-3 years later and blame everyone else for your own problems is wrong. You got it wrong, Freeman. You got it wrong. You made decisions that were wrong. You failed to act, or you acted wrongly. You failed. You got it wrong, and you caused directly the death of many people. Just admit it. Mr. Anwar also had a message for any politician who may have deleted, as he puts, WhatsApp messages. When by deleted, I think he means deliberately deleted in order to obfuscate the truth and to avoid prosecution for far worse crimes. We reported how Nicola Sturgeon had been told to hand over her messages, but she claims she does not have any relevant communications to present. Here's the thing, Sturgeon is saying that, but they've got people who've received them. They've got the receipts. So they know that she sent messages by WhatsApp. Now she's claiming she didn't. I think that when she's presented with the receipts, she's going to have a very big question to answer. And some of these receipts will be quite shocking. Some of the messages she sent will be, enough to indict her. Some of these. Now, I've just reeled this picture up, but I've got to say, she ain't half piling it on. She's turning into Alex Salmond, isn't she? In every possible way. Except, obviously, with the charm. Anyway, he told BBC Radio Scotland how the inquiry was just covering planning at this stage, but would eventually move to decisions taken when the virus arrived. He added, and then we start to ask the questions of our ministers, former first ministers and prime ministers. What were you doing? What happened? Were you holding these discussions? He said, if you deleted your WhatsApp messages, if you say you have no record, well, that's unacceptable. That's a potential breach of the law, and you should have kept a record. And of course, the fact is, if they say they didn't, and then the receipt is shown that they did, that too is a serious crime, especially in an inquiry, and its perversion of the course of justice. That can carry 5 years in prison. Also, destruction of evidence. That can carry a further 5 years in prison. If it turns out that that evidence that you destroyed against the instructions not to turned out to be vital evidence that could be used in the prosecution of people for capital crimes, like, taking of lives, the person that deleted that message could do life in prison. There's going to be a lot of tweaking little bottoms over the next few days. Miss Sturgeon's former Deputy First Minister John Swinney is also due to give evidence today. Scotland's former Chief Medical Officer Catherine Calderwood, who infamously broke lockdown rules by travelling to a second home, was due to give evidence yesterday, but her appearance was cancelled. A separate Scottish inquiry will also take place in the future. This, of course, is the UK-wide inquiry. Now, this evidence coming out is going to make very uncomfortable reading for those in power. The decisions made were quite clearly wrong, but they were decisions made in the heat of a pandemic. Mistakes will have been made. We can accept that. We can accept human fallibility. What we can't accept is people failing to accept their fallibility, to say, yes, we made a mistake. I made a decision that turned out, in hindsight, to be the wrong decision. Do that, we can accept it and move on. Trying to avoid this, trying to say you never made a mistake, trying to pass the buck down the line, unacceptable. Lying that you don't have WhatsApp messages, unacceptable. Destruction of evidence by deleting those WhatsApp messages, unacceptable. I think jail. I think there's got to be jail cases coming out of this. I think there needs to be a criminal prosecution of a few people, a few senior people, and with a few jail sentences handed out, because that will sharpen the minds of others. And it means that anything in the future that happens like this, better decisions will be made. Anyway, I'm going to round off and come up. I think there's likely to be a lot more truth to come out than the establishment in this country are, comfortable with. There will be questions asked. There will be accusations made. I think ultimately there will be some decisions that were quite clearly wrong, that quite clearly ended up being criminal. And I do feel that there needs to be some very lengthy jail sentences, because in only that way will they learn. When these officials and these faceless bureaucrats know that they could end up doing 20, 30 years in prison, only then will they start making the right decisions should anything like this ever happen again. And it's about time it did. Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do keep watching, because we do have the nippy evidence today. She will be up there. I'm going to do a whole video on Cranky's evidence. Whether it happens today or be first thing tomorrow, I don't know. We'll look at the whole evidence. But once we've got Sturgeon up there and the thing she said, that's definitely another video. So do hit the subscribe button. Don't miss that. And until next time, stay safe, stay well. Remember, they're all lying bastards. And goodbye.